Thank you and welcome to the August 27, 2012 City Council meeting. I'll call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Present. Present.
Present. I'd like Ms. Judith Lunston to come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, our new superintendent of schools. And please remain standing at the end of the pledge.
Good evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I've asked you to remain standing because just recently, on August 8th, we lost the services of a dedicated public servant, an invaluable asset to the City Council and the citizens of Cranston with the passing of Mr. Stephen Warner. He'll be greatly missed. His services were absolutely incredible. He got us through many a budget season with his knowledge and understanding of all things to do with budget. So I would ask you to just take a minute to remember him and a moment of silence, please. I thank you. This time I'll entertain a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the last meeting.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? There being none, please take the roll, clerk.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Present, yes. There is a resolution on the docket in error this evening. It's going to be heard at the Public Works Committee meeting on September 13th, and that had to do with open space. So if there's anyone here that, I won't prevent you from speaking about it, but that won't be heard this evening. It will be heard at Public Works. Public acknowledgements and commendations. Are there any public acknowledgements or commendations? There being none, we'll go to public hearings. Is Mr. Smith here yet? That's the first presentation. Okay, we're going to skip that for the time being because there's someone who's crucial to that presentation that hasn't arrived yet. He's in traffic. We will hear, there was a motion to hear this in executive session, but it's been suggested that we hear it in an open session. This is the resolution approving the memorandum of agreement with the school department, reducing the cumulative deficit owed by the city in the amount of $939,544. I'll allow the parties to speak, and then anyone from the public that wishes to speak will also be heard. Mr. Oliverio.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the City Council. My name is Matthew Oliverio of the law firm Oliverio and Marcascio. Many of you know me from your dealings with me during the Carullo case that was tried a number of years ago. Before you this evening is a resolution. And let me just give you a little backdrop before I get into the terms of the memorandum of agreement that was negotiated between the mayor's office and the school committee. You'll recall 2 years ago, after the Carullo case was tried and there was an audit about a year and a half later, which was July of 2010, a consent order was entered by Judge Savage. And in the context of that consent order, the court found that the school department owed a cumulative or incurred a cumulative deficit of about $5.6 million. And under the consent order, the school department is obligated to repay that deficit over a period of 4 years, beginning in the fiscal year 2012 and ending in 2015. And they've been doing that. Now, in the school year 2009 through 2010, this body appropriated about $124 million for the school department operations. Out of that sum, there was an estimate that the school department would receive approximately $31 million in state aid. So that was one component. The rest of the monies were from the municipality, and the taxes and other sources of revenue. But $31 million was supposed to come from state aid. Once that appropriation was set, that is a promise to the school department that the city, through whatever sources of revenue, are going to provide that amount for the school department operations to meet the BEP and all the various programs, including the contracts, the collective bargaining agreements, etc. After we got into the fiscal year, we all found out that the state aid had been reduced by about $2 million, so that the state only appropriated about $29 million that year, so that left a gap of about $2 million. Some of that $2 million gap was made up through stimulus funds, okay, and also recalculation of a pension or some pension monies that we received, such that the gap in state aid was reduced from $2 million to about $939,000. Now, the school department brought that to our attention early on and said, meaning, when I say us, meaning the city, and said that, you know, this was our appropriation, city, you've shortchanged us some $939,000, and the city took the position that, you know, we did some statutory interpretation and said, well, we're not obligated, we provided sufficient funds, etc. In the interim, this very issue cropped up in the town of Tiverton. And the same thing happened where a certain amount was projected for state aid, and the town of Tiverton did not realize that amount in state aid, and they in effect shortchanged the school department tens of thousands of dollars. And the school department challenged that before the commissioner, and the commissioner said, it doesn't matter, once you set the appropriation, you're stuck with that appropriation. And if the state does not provide the funding, you have to make up the funding, town of Tiverton or city of Cranston or whomever, because you've already appropriated that amount, and that's the amount that they need to function as a school department. They appealed that to the Board of Regents, the town did, and the Board of Regents sustained the commissioner. And this was back in 2011. And then the town of Tiverton went one step further, and they tried to have the matter reviewed by the Rhode Island Supreme Court through a writ of certiorari. And that writ was denied. So right now, the commissioner's interpretation of the maintenance of effort statutes and what should be appropriated and the interplay between the state funding and the local funding is in effect binding. And after that decision came down, that's when the school department came to the city once again and said, you know, we have a problem and now we have some binding precedent and we need to reach an agreement because we can in effect sue the city for the short funding. And this is different from a Carullo action, completely different, because the city said, we're going to give you this amount, we just didn't realize the revenue. And the commissioner says, well, that's no excuse, you have to come up with the funding because that's what you appropriated. So, in the last few months, the attorneys for the school department, the school committee chair, the mayor, myself, Bob Strom, we went through the analysis, and we also double-checked the numbers with Joe Balducci, and Bob Strom ran the numbers, and we are satisfied that, in fact, the school department, the appropriation was $939,544 short because of the reduced state funding. And so what we have before you today is a memorandum of agreement, which is a better alternative to litigating this issue, because in my humble estimation, there's really no defense that the city could mount. And if we lose, the city would be obligated to pay the $939,000 in one lump sum once it ripens into a judgment. So what we did, if I can just continue, Mr. President, as you know, the school department has to pay back about $1.4 million a year. And so what we agreed to do was to take that $939,000 and amortize that over the next 3 years to reduce the cumulative deficit, so that this coming year, if the school department owes the city $1.4 million, that $1.4 million will be reduced by $313. And the agreement provides that that will take place over the next 3 years. And we view this as a prudent and wise option for the city to handle it that way, so that there's no cash out of pocket. There's no possibility of a judgment being entered. And it's, in effect, an amendment to the consent decree, but we wanted to do it in a more informal manner because the parties don't want to have to get the judge involved in this. We don't want to have to get the Auditor General involved in this. We think that this memorandum of agreement captures the understanding of the parties, the intent, and it avoids litigation, which would be costly, and I assure you, not only in legal fees, but in most likely a judgment, an adverse judgment against the city. So that's how we've handled it. I'll take any questions on the memorandum of agreement. I'd ask for you that you approve this tonight. That's what I'm here for.
Mr. Oliverio, just one correction. Repeat the amount of the reduction each year, because I thought you said $313, but I know it's more than that.
Right. It's 313, a little north of 313, because if you take the $939.
$313,000.
Yes.
You said $313.
No, I meant 313,000.
Yes, just I wanted you to repeat that. Okay. Okay, you said your piece. Does Mr. Scunzio have anything to say on the school department's time?
No, I think Matt did a wonderful job explaining.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public who wants to make any comment on this? Is there anyone from the public that wants to make any comment on this? Mr. Tomlins? I don't. The reason for doing this in public is that both parties agreed that we did not need to do this in executive session. Had we gone into executive session, everyone out there would be delayed another 45 minutes. So this is just an expediency. Our attorney agreed, and the school department's attorney agreed that we would hear this now. So just so that the public gets to speak on this, I'm allowing anyone to speak. So go ahead.
Richard Tomlins, 400 Farmington Avenue in Cranston. I've watched these budgets over the year in the school department. I sat in the auditorium many times and watched them on the screen, and then all the questions and answers. And there's no question in my mind, due to the Carullo Act, which I was against from the beginning by the very nature of it, but it was always, I felt, a little convoluted. I'd go home and take a look at it, and I was never quite sure exactly what we were doing. And of course, in their defense, some of that has to do with what's going to come from the state, what isn't, the work that you're now doing between the council and the school committee, which I approve. It's the closest relationship I've seen ever, and I think that's admirable. But the question then comes down to, is this the fairest way to handle it? And basically, if you look at it on the surface and read what I read tonight, you could say, based on what the lawyer said, it seems the number seems to be correct, and the payoff, the amortization, you can pick any number you want over any number of years. But obviously, the council has much more insight on this. They're the ones that have got the financial burden of the city on their shoulders, so I would defer to them. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? There being none, I close that
Mr. President,
portion.
one other point I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I had a question.
Well, I'm going to
Is he
assume
going to
it.
be available during the?
Yes, yeah, Mr. Olivieri, if you
Yep.
just have a minute, I'm going to
Sure.
entertain a motion to approve,
Okay.
and then under discussion, the council members may want to ask you questions, if that's okay.
And can I make one more point, Mr. President? Because now with the state funding formula in place, there's going to be a lot more predictability in the budgeting process and the appropriation, which didn't exist in the 2009-2010 budget year. So I just wanted to point that out to you. What's that?
Okay, so we close the public hearing. Okay, first I need a motion to suspend the rules so we can take this out of order. There's a motion? I need a second.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? There being none, please take the roll on the motion to suspend.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. On the motion? Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Clerk, please, under discussion, excuse me,
Yep.
yes. Now, Council Vice
Thank
President
you.
Navarro.
Yeah, I have a question. Just want to clarify with Attorney Oliverio. How are you?
Good.
Just very familiar with this. I've been,
Right.
through the whole process and understand it pretty clearly. The one question that I do have, this is totally separate. This is about the state aid in that given year
Correct.
that they were shortchanged. Now, this has nothing to do with what was agreed upon, the amount that was agreed upon, that the schools were underfunded from the initial action, and it was like 1.8 million as opposed to the 2.1. There was a discrepancy based on the auditor's reports that the schools had said they maintained that they were still underfunded. This has nothing to do with that, because there's still that
Right.
that open argument that the schools do have and can make based on the audits. And I just want to clarify that this has nothing to do with the amount that we had.
That's right. The argument under Carullo was the appropriation that you set for us, City Council, you didn't give us enough money. In this case, you set the appropriation, the consent order, that was all taken care of, but the city didn't get the state aid, and that's of no fault of the school department, and Rhode Island Department of Education says you're stuck with that appropriated number, and the maintenance of effort statutes say you're stuck with that number. It's because the state didn't provide the funding, and it was actually a $2 million shortfall, but we received some stimulus money that reduced that deficit. So two different issues.
Just one other quick question. So based on what you just mentioned, so when we decided to appropriate the 124,700,000 and change, that included state aid coming to us
Of
to
31
appropriate
million.
that? So in other words, we said through the administration and through the budgeting process, we never gave them the 124,000 that year?
We didn't, no,
Because we didn't get it from the state, they didn't get it, we didn't give it to the schools?
That's correct.
So we shorted the schools the appropriation that we had promised them that budget year from 124?
Because the city didn't get it. The city was relying on 31 million of state aid and didn't receive it.
Yeah, that's,
So-
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's obvious.
Yeah, so that's why they're here saying you.
And how come it
we
took
owe
how come it
900
took so long for the schools to come get this money?
Well, because this area of the law was unsettled until the Tiverton decision came out last summer, and then it went through the appeal process, and then they said, okay, now we have some good case law on our side, so now we have a little bit of a hammer, let's revisit this issue with the city, because they were in a better position, candidly, to make the argument. They made the argument before, we dismissed it because we argued what Tiverton argued, and Tiverton lost.
Right, I'm gonna.
Now it's pretty clear cut.
Okay, I mean, it's very clear
Yep.
cut, so I'm going to be supporting this 100%. I mean, the school should have had this money, if they were shorted it a long time ago, so.
And the way we're doing it is instead of cash, they're gonna apply it toward the deficit. That's all, and I think that's the responsible way to do it. And they worked with us on that, because they know the city didn't have the money.
Councilman Stichels? All set? Any other discussion? There being none, clerk, please take the roll on the resolution.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if the council will oblige us, I'd like to bring up Mr. Mark Marchese to,
I just want to make a motion to unsuspend the rules, because we were under suspended
Second.
rules.
second. No, we don't need to do that.
You don't need to do that?
That's not necessary. I'm going to ask the council's indulgence to bring Mr. Mark Marchese forward to engage us in the bid opening for the sale of 275 Atwood Avenue, also known as the old police station. Is there any objection? Mr. Marchese, the bids went out on what particular date?
The bids went out on July 12th, and then we re-advertised on August 10th, 2012, to adhere to the city charter rules 2 weeks prior to an opening.
And how many bid packages were picked up or mailed out?
17.
And how many responded?
One bid.
And so you're now prepared to open that bid? By the way, is the administration ready to present the new assessed value at this time? Do we have that assessed value? You don't have it here, okay. You wanna?
Yeah, we do. I don't know if you want me to sign it. Yeah, $1,075,000.
$1,075,000 is the assessed value of the property. So, Rick, your magic, what's 90% of that? 967,000?
$500.
$500, okay. Did you have that in a mayonnaise job on the back shelf? It's like a Kreskin.
Bid deposit is sufficient. $1 million. $1 million, no deviation. And the bidder was Crown Holdings LLC. I just want to let you know, I put Capianato Group LLC because that was on the outside of the envelope that they handed in. On the bid right here, it says the company's Crown Holdings LLC.
Crown Holdings LLC for $1 million. Are there any contingencies that the council should be aware of? Were there any, was the bid stated as no contingencies, or?
Again, they have to present to you, there's their project in here. I'll make copies for the council.
That was part of the original, when we decided to sell it, that we, I know Council President Garabedian at the time had stressed some various things that we agreed on. While I have you here, so we're done with that, is that correct? While I have you here, later on in the agenda, so that you can be excused later, we had some questions regarding the updated audio or lack of in the council. Do we have any interest in that?
I did receive another bid for the council chambers, and again, I'm going to meet with the administration and the council to go over before I finalize, just so before anything gets ordered, anything gets done, it would have to go through the Board of Contract and Purchase, make sure we have enough money, and then make sure it's what we want for a final project in the city council chambers, maybe to keep the aesthetics the same, or we'll have to make a decision on that, on how we want to do the wiring around the city council chambers, because it's very difficult to make it look flush, but we're going to try and do the best we can without any of the cords on the floors and the walls.
And hopefully get rid of the stuff such as next to you with the wires hanging and...
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, any questions for Mr. Marchese?
Are we going to continue to advertise in the Journal?
What, the sale?
No, the police station. Or this is it?
This is it. This is it.
This is,
How many times have we advertised?
Well, since the charter rules changed, I want to say I advertised this probably 3 to 4 times, and each time twice. So I would say almost maximum 8 times in the newspaper.
Councilman Lupino, may I ask a question about this sale? As far as exactly what was sold, as far as parking area at the old police station?
you can see Mr. Marchese.
We don't have that information for the public?
That was all part of the bid package. It was,
In the bid package, I'll give you a copy, Tony, and on the front alone, they have spaces that with their proposal and what they're going to do. So I guess before there's any final signing or final closings, the cities will make arrangements and agreements with the park next door to make sure there's enough parking for the softball.
Thank you.
Anything else, Council President?
thank you, Mr. Marchese.
Thank you, Council
for your time. Mr. Strom?
Yeah, Councilman, traditionally, I believe the policy's always been that any proceeds that we would receive that's greater than 90% of the assessed value would go to either debt service or capital items. My question would be, I think we need to talk about, as you know, last year we credited the school department in our fund balance. We actually gave them $1 million off of their deficit because it was predicated whether we sold the property or we didn't sell it. So we took care of that. So my thinking is that this money, in my opinion, should go back to our fund balance. Now, that's up to the council to make the final decision.
Point of order, could you use the mic, because I can...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Could you start from the
Yep.
beginning?
Normally speaking, with the sale of property, it's based on 90% of the value of that assessed value. And usually that money, whatever you receive for that sale, is used for either debt service or capital expenditures. Because last year there was an agreement that we would give the school department a credit to their deficit and also their fund balance, and it would come from the city side, whether we sold the property at Atwood Avenue or we didn't sell it. Well, unfortunately, we didn't sell it at that time. So my question is, the fact that now, if the sale is consummated and we do get, say, $1 million, can we have that $1 million and restore the city's fund balance, which we've already given to the school, without having to allocate it to debt service or capital projects?
My response would be that I would ask for it to become an agenda item on the next Finance Committee meeting, and that you bring forth with the solicitor and maybe Mr. Quinlan also, any past history that we might have on how that's handled, because it certainly seems like we created a debt by dipping into those funds to pay the school, so that would be the debt service. But again, I'll let you guys figure that out. So we'll put that as an agenda item on the Finance Committee agenda for the next.
Because, Council President, this is a little unique from a normal sale. We've had other sales last year, like Castleton Properties, the Hamilton Building, and all we did was use those funds to pay off debt service.
Council Vice President?
Just to follow up with Mr. Strom on that, the schools, the sale never happened, and that was promised to the schools, but their deficit was reduced by the $1 million.
That's right.
In lieu of not selling the,
That's right.
never sold a police station. So I don't see why, now that we've had the sale, that's not separate now. We've reduced their deficit by the $1 million they were promised.
Now, my question is not that it's owed for the school.
Right.
My question is, do we have the ability to restore our fund balance by this sale if it does go through? Normally, we just use it towards debt service and capital projects. We don't bring this money back into the fund balance. In this particular case, I think we should be able to, because we've already allocated that money over to the school in a prior year.
Yeah, I think it's best, the council president had said for it to go on an agenda.
Okay.
But again, I just want to understand, when we credited the $1 million to the schools, it was really a paper transaction.
Right.
There was we didn't take $1 million out of any account and appropriate it, or reduce their balance. It was just a paper transaction.
Right.
So,
but that reduced what they owed to us.
Right.
So that's that much less over this 4 or 5 year period that we're going to receive back.
Okay, we'll end discussion on that because it's not an agenda item, so other than your question isn't, so let's bring it up at the Finance Committee, please. Back on the agenda, we are on, is Mr. Smith here yet? Okay, I have a list. This will be under public hearings now on docketed items. And anyone is allowed to speak, but I have a sign-up sheet already. The first one is Diana Gordon. Please come forward, state your name and address. No. Ms. Gordon is not here? You are here? Oh, there you are. All set? Dick Tomlins?
You want to speak?
I think I signed it first on document.
Here. Judge? No. You got to be more important.
Excuse me. This is last month? Could I have this month? This says 7/23, I'm sorry. It was on my desk. Yes, back to the sign-up sheet. John DeBona.
Mr. President, members of the council, I'm here on a matter that's before you from the Safety Services and License Committee. I represent JVP Enterprises, doing business as the Grill on Comstock. It's a restaurant that's been operating in Cranston for several months, was issued a Class BV limited alcoholic beverage license. Mr. Joseph Pinocchio is with me. He's the principal. He's finding, as most restaurants do, that he needs to have a full Class BV license. Patrons ask for it. He needs it to compete. And based upon the fact that you have a cap, we have to come before the full council after the recommendation from the Safety Services and License Committee. We will be before that committee, and they've recommended approval of this license to you, and I would ask that you grant the full Class BV alcoholic beverage license to JVP Enterprises, doing business as the Grill on Comstock. Thank you.
Tom McAndrew.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. My name is Thomas McAndrew. My address is 1 Turk's Head Place, Providence, Rhode Island. I'm here on behalf of Falvey Linen Supply and its owner, Mr. Jim O'Hara, who's here with me this evening, a company that employs over 250 private sector employees here in Cranston, and an individual who has built a very substantial business, working in concert with the City Council in the past, and looks forward to continuing to work with the Council on a go-forward basis. Mr. President, we are here this evening because last Thursday, Mr. O'Hara received notice that the city was going to entertain a substantial change in the sewer system and private wastewater disposal ordinance. And we've had prior conversations with your various departments, and particularly your solicitor, Evan Kirschenbaum, who has worked collaboratively with Falvey Linen over a long period of time, and we're indeed thankful for his assistance over the past few years. But as far as the ordinance is concerned, Mr. President, as you know, when I became aware of it, I wrote you a letter on Friday morning, August 24th, in which I essentially indicated that with this type of quantum leap that was going to be made by the city of Cranston, that we felt an appropriate period of gestation where people could review and analyze, and we could get our experts in to make recommendations to you so that the ordinance could be appropriate and proper and could also incorporate other concerns that we might have. I would also add that we currently pay over $300,000 in sewer use fees to the city. And we're not quarreling over it, and we're not quarreling over the idea that maybe the ordinance needs to be modified. The only suggestion that we respectfully make is that we be given a reasonable period of time to get our experts in to review what the ordinance would do, its impact, how it would impact on us and other industrial and commercial uses, and to come back and make recommendations to you or to your appropriate committee. And in that way, we think we can come up with an ordinance which is more informed and more enlightened, and will then be something that we can look to as a model for other communities to follow. We're not looking to throw a monkey wrench in, if you will. We're not looking to do that. We're merely looking to be able to have a period of time to review and to study and to come back and make recommendations, and then we move forward with an appropriate revised ordinance. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the committee.
Dick Tomlins.
Richard Tomlins, 400 Farmington Avenue, Cranston. Just a quick comment again on what you just voted for on the school committee. It is a loss to the city, because you're not going to get that money. So somebody, I think, said it was a no-cash deal. I don't see where it's a no-cash deal because the amount that they owe the city is being reduced by that amount. So I think that should be clearly in the record. The other thing is, even though I think there's a 5-year plan now for the school committees of the districts to be reimbursed from the state, that's about what it is, a plan. So those of you who keep your nose under the tent up there on the hill better keep it there, because there's no guarantee that next year they'll do the same thing. It's going to be dependent on politics and the financial situation of the state at the time. On the sale of the police building, I didn't hear any details and I didn't read any details, so I assume the city's not taking back any paper on that. But when we talk about what we do with the money, I've talked about, and I'd like to see somebody come up with something about our unfunded liabilities for pensions and health care. The last time I knew, that unfunded amount was $250 to $300 million. If I stand corrected, I'll stand corrected, but that can do nothing but grow if we do nothing to it now. I don't know why the administration or the council doesn't go forward and come up with a plan for that. That's the thing that we were put on the watch for. It wasn't because of our operating budget, it was because of that unfunded liability. If that isn't attended to very quickly, you're going to see more pressure put on the city. You're living on the edge. We're very fortunate that we're only on the edge, but that's what we're living on, is the edge. You could put $15 million a year into that thing if you had it, and it would still grow, because obviously the obligation would grow. So what I implore the council to do is to come up with a plan for that. Thank you.
Diana Gordon is still on the list. Are you passing again? Okay. Anyone else come forward?
Good evening. My name is Fred Jocelyn, 23 Gaglione Court, Cranston. I'm here to address the proposed ordinance number 6-12-7, which is on page 2. I attended the ordinance committee hearing on August the 16th that was chaired by Councilman Stikos, and I sensed some degree of urgency that this ordinance needed to be enacted with some haste because of the statute 45-22-2.1 and following, which is called the Rhode Island Comprehensive Planning and Land Use Act. I'm here tonight to assuage that concern about the need to pass this thing with haste, and I suggest to you that you examine the holding of the Rhode Island Supreme Court in the matter of Michael West against James McDonald, which was decided on May 6, 2011. In that matter, the property owner and the East Providence Zoning Board came into conflict with regard to the requirement that zoning ordinances conform to the comprehensive land use plan. The land developer, property owner, relied upon this provision in the Zoning Enabling Act that required an 18-month period for the zoning ordinances to conform. The Supreme Court wrestled with this ordinance, with the statute, both from the zoning perspective and from the Comprehensive Land Use Plan Act, and stated that the time period in that matter was not directory. Strike that. It was not mandatory, it was directory. And it was a matter of statutory interpretation, quite frankly, because the court said that there were no sanctions involved in the statute if the time period was not properly observed. Now, I offer to you tonight, ladies and gentlemen of the council, the matter before you involves the same statute. The facts may differ a bit, but the same statute is involved. There is no urgency nor haste to pass it because our Supreme Court, in this latest pronouncement just over a year ago, has stated that there are no sanctions in that statute, therefore there is no mandatory requirement. If you recall, Chairman Stikos, on the August 16th meeting, there were two speakers, including myself, who thought that because of the magnitude of the comprehensive land use plan and the fact that it was going to be presented before the Rhode Island Department of Administration and its impact upon this city for the next 10 years, which would affect not only property owners but land developers, historic districts, and the traditional neighborhoods, that a go slow attitude would be in order and very prudent. I thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Anyone else from the public wishing to speak on an agenda item?
Through the chair, Council President, my name is Peter LaPola. I am the Director of Planning for the City of Cranston. I wasn't going to speak tonight. I was just going to sit here and answer questions, but just a couple points of clarification. At the at the Ordinance Committee meeting, it wasn't brought forth that there was a matter of urgency. It was a question as to if the City Council had raised no major concerns with the comp plan, why wasn't it being brought forth? And the council and the Ordinance Committee in its wisdom brought it forth without recommendation. It was not we did not argue that had to be passed within a certain time frame, although it does have to be passed before the council disappears. With regards to penalty, there is a penalty. It's not quite as written as a penalty. There are two penalties attached to the ordinance, to the comp plan, if it's not approved by the state. First of all, once it is approved by the state, then all state actions are bound and guided by that comp plan. And until such time as it is approved by the state is not bound by the local community comprehensive plan. And then secondly, the state is tying and has begun to tie and is tying the grant of basically granting grants, giving funds for grants to adopt a comprehensive communities that have adopted and approved comprehensive plans by the Department of Administration. So those communities that do not have approved comprehensive plans either will not be receiving discretionary grants or receive lesser points when they are reviewed. And that's not a position I think that the city would want to put itself in. And then lastly, I think what's being missed here is the process that we're going through. It's not a question of whether the city wishes to adopt a comprehensive plan and the land use policies that are contained within that plan. The city has already adopted that. They have adopted that over a year ago. For the purposes of local enforcement, the comprehensive plan was adopted in 2010. And that includes the future land use plan and the zoning that will come from it. So it's not like you don't adopt this plan, you don't have an updated comprehensive plan. What's before the City Council is the process, and I've explained this once before or other times, the process that you go through for this is that once it's adopted by the local community, it is sent to the state for basically a consistency review with its guide plans. The state then either approves the comprehensive plan, finds where it is inconsistent with their guide plans and make recommendations for change, and then the city will basically, through the planning departments usually, work out the changes to the comp plan to bring them into consistency with the state guide plans. That's the process that we followed over the last year, year and a half. So the state has given us a letter saying these are the areas of inconsistency, these are the types of things you need to do to bring the comprehensive plan into consistency with the state guide plan so that the state may formally approve the comprehensive plan. We've made those changes, and again, if the council wants to, I can go through the changes that we have made.
Not at this time, Mr. Lopolo.
All
You're
right.
speaking under
So,
public.
so
speaking.
the requirement then is that the council adopt the plan as suggested, agreed to by the state with the changes in it, and then they can approve the comprehensive plan. So the question that's before the council is, to my mind, very simple. Do they want to live with a comprehensive plan that's only been locally adopted, or do they wish to make the changes to the comprehensive plan as agreed to by the state so that the state may approve the comprehensive plan? And that's sort of what's before the city council now. We made no changes except for the few changes that I talked about on the Johnson & Wales property. The land use plan stays the same. What changes is simply how we handle the zoning amendment, bringing consistency in the expansion of utilities. And lastly, in response to the court ruling, the state has updated its Comprehensive Plan Act. We're not under that for the comprehensive plan, but what it clearly says is now where there's a conflict between the comprehensive plan and zoning controls.
Anyone else from the public wishing to speak on an agenda item?
Mr. President, those comments deserve a rebuttal. May I have an opportunity, please?
There's not a position for a rebuttal here. We'll have to let the council take this up. You had your time to speak. I'm sorry. Anyone else wishing to speak? We have a long agenda tonight, Judge. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak? These are on docketed items.
This is on the comprehensive plan and the ordinance. They're on your docket for tonight.
Pull the microphone down, speak directly into it, state your name and address first.
My name is Sandra Haupt. I live at 130 Shirley Boulevard, and I would like to make a few short comments on both the comprehensive plan and the ordinance zoning, unless you want me to separate them and wait and come back to the next one. But in general, my looking at this, and I've been studying it and coming to your ordinance meetings, and there does seem to be quite a bit of a rush. I don't know that I have ever seen things that I thought were agreed you were going to provide the public, that being what exists now and what you're replacing it with. So it's very difficult to match apples to apples. But there are several instances I've found where you are weakening the governance that Cranston has, and you are giving applicants, which I can only assume are business applicants for land use, supremacy over voters and neighborhoods and people. And you're giving the city planner, who is a public employee, the ability to make changes, and the public, me, the voter, has no recourse because you've weakened the statutes and given somebody who is not beholding to voters an ability to make decisions on, well, we will allow this because I say so. And I, the voter who's living next door to this project, really would have no recourse. So before you vote something tonight or soon, have a very finished product that you want to stand by that protects my rights as a citizen. Thank you and good luck.
Anyone else from the public wishing to speak? There being none, that session is closed. Council Vice President, did you had your hand up first?
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Lopolo when this comes up before us.
When it comes before, sure, yep. Mr. Gawker, are we still waiting for Mr. Smith? Is he on his way, or what are we doing? And how, Mr. Gorka, how long is your presentation?
10 minutes.
How about 6? Can we negotiate?
Council President, as you know, and we've been following through this, this is the last public comment hearing that we're having on our connection with our revised sewer permit.
Could I interrupt you for a second? Could you reiterate that for Mr. McAndrew?
Okay.
Because it sounded in his letter to me that this is the first they were hearing about this, but I've been at several meetings, and this has been going back and forth several times.
This is revised in conjunction with DEM, our local permit discharge limits, which apply to local businesses as to what they can and cannot put into the sewer waste system. I'm sure Mr. McAndrew knows in general what we're doing and that we're required to do this under our new DEM permit. I think what he was referring to is that he didn't know how it would impact Falvey Linen specifically. Mr. McAndrew and I communicate all the time. I think Falvey Linen has been great throughout this process. They met with the city several times, and we've generally been able to work out all issues with Falvey Linen. I think there was a understanding or a misunderstanding that tonight we were going to pass this ordinance. Tonight, what we're doing is simply having a public hearing as required by DEM to inform the public as to what the changes are going to be. Following this presentation, DEM will have a concurrent commentary period that any user can comment to DEM about how they feel this will affect their business. So I think, as I told Mr. McAndrew, tonight is exactly what he wants. He wants the ability to come before the council and to tell what he thinks about this local limit, and clearly his opinion is he'd like some more time to study the local limit and how it may affect his client, Falvey Linen. I have no objection to meeting with Mr. McAndrew and the sewer team to go over what we feel are his major problems with the potential new limits. We know, for example, that the limits can be extended, strike that, the commentary period can be extended. RIARC has made overtures to DEM already to extend the commentary period, but right now our comment period is slated to run through September of, the end of September 2012. So it's at least another 30 days at the onset, and I understand that RIARC has made an application to run it an additional 90 days, but I'm not exactly sure.
And just one thing I want to add to Mr. McAndrew, understand that by bringing this out in the open and public, your client now has the ability to see what these limits are. His on-site engineers or chemical people can see what you are discharging, what you would be expected to be discharging in the future, and it's actually going to help you as opposed to hurt you.
And it's not a situation whereby even if the council were to pass this today, we're going to phase it in. We're going to work with Cranston businesses to assure them that they can get into compliance and they're fairly certain about what they have to do. We don't want to create uncertainty in the business climate. I think that would be counterproductive to the needs of Cranston. And tonight, as I said before, we're not going to ask the council to pass anything, just simply ask questions and hear from maybe local users who may be in the system to explain their concerns, and we can address them. With that being said, I have Dave Bowen from Wright Pierce, Brian Werner from Wright Pierce as well, Dan Gorka from Veolia, and Al Tatella from Tatella Engineering, who is in charge of our municipal industrial pretreatment program. And with the 6-minute cap, I've left you maybe 30 seconds between all of you. So
Again, Larry wanted to apologize to the council for his delay in not being here this evening.
Good evening, Council President and Councilors. Dan Gorka, 23 Church Street, Brooklyn, Connecticut. What this presentation's about, as Solicitor Kirschenbaum had alluded to, is just specifically a presentation of why and how we derive various limits for industrial users. Just to give you a background, the Cranston wastewater plant or water pollution control facility treats all the sewage collected from both domestic users and industrial generators of wastewater as well. The wastewater plant's discharge to the Patuxent River and Narragansett Bay are regulated by EPA under the Clean Water Act. EPA in turn delegates its authority to the state of Rhode Island to regulate all the municipal wastewater plants. Part of the Clean Water Act program also includes the monitoring and regulating of industrial users that are discharging to the various municipal plants. RIDEM, Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, in turn delegates that authority to the municipalities. And that's where this local limits revision is coming from. Part of the process in reviewing these limits and determining them are subject to review by DEM to make sure that they're consistent with guidelines provided by EPA under their Clean Water Act. Some of what's driving the revised limits is the new permit for the wastewater plant that was initially issued in October of 2008. There's a number of pollutant limits within that permit that the plant can't meet. The plant is actually under a consent agreement that was signed in November of 2009. And so part of that consent agreement was to allow Cranston to evaluate what it can do to meet those future limits, and it really fell under two options, both of which are being exercised. The first one was related to the facility plan, for which there was a public hearing several weeks ago, and that involves upgrading the wastewater plant. However, there are significant loadings coming to the facility, so another part of the review was, and it was also under the consent agreement with DEM, under our new permit, was to evaluate the local limits and see if there's if we need to refine those limits to ensure that we're protecting the treatment plant from being overloaded. And part of this process, EPA guidelines have what's called pollutants of concern. Most of these pollutants of concern are already in the sewer use ordinance, so it's just a matter of reviewing them, seeing if they need to be refined, or maybe even if they can be relaxed in some cases. But there were some pollutants of concerns that weren't in the sewer use ordinance that needed to be evaluated. So this is a list, and I'm not going to go over each one of these, but I would highlight, this is EPA's pollutants of concerns. There were some new ones in the right column that they added, nitrogen being one of them, biochemical oxygen demand, and those were really two of the most impacted pollutants of concerns as far as the proposed revisions to the ordinance. Additional pollutants of concerns are listed here. They include various other things. There's some concerns that were associated with these particular pollutants that Cranston identified specifically, that's specific to the treatment plant. Things that might be otherwise toxic to the plant if they were too high in concentration, contribute to odor, corrosion of the underground sewer piping, and then, again, the capacity of the plant. In order to evaluate these limits, the first step under the EPA guidelines is to make a determination of what the plant can handle for each pollutant loading. The next step is to assess what the domestic loadings are. Basically, because these are uncontrolled discharges, we can't monitor what every one of the 70,000 sewer users are discharging to the system. And then the last step is after we deduct their loadings from what the plant's capacity is, we would then go ahead and allocate the remaining loading, allowable loading that the plant can handle to the industries. based on the maximum allowable loadings, the current domestic loadings, there were a couple of pollutants where we found, in order to meet our future permit limits under the November 2009 consent agreement, that we would not be able to, we would be over capacity if we didn't take means to reduce what's coming into the plant, despite the plans for upgrades that the city has in place. And those mainly are for the carbonaceous bio-oxygen demand, total nitrogen, which many of you may be familiar with respect to the Bay and the Save the Bay Committee, and then arsenic. Therefore, for those pollutants of concerns, we needed to go through and do a more detailed analysis. So the limits were determined based on how the available pollutants of concern loadings were allocated amongst, oh, I'm sorry, I already went through that. So basically, there were two ways of allocating the loading to the industrial users, and particularly with respect to the three pollutants that were mentioned. One way is to uniformly allocate it where everybody has the same concentration limit, and they are able to discharge a mass loading, and that's proportional to the flow that they discharge. The other way to allocate it is to actually assign mass loadings to different users. The next slide goes over the changes that were proposed under this local limits update. These are the proposed changes. The right-hand column is what we recommend to go to modify the sewer use ordinance. You'll see there's cases where some of the limits were relaxed. Some of the limits didn't exist before in the case of total nitrogen and phosphorus, and then BOD, which I believe is on there.
Mr. Walker, you're at 8 minutes and 30 seconds, so...
Only be a couple more minutes.
I want to interrupt you. I stopped the time for now, okay?
Yep.
What I have to ask you is this. Is this report in this form available to any of the interested
absolutely.
members of the public?
Absolutely.
So how would they obtain that copy? Or can it be sent electronically?
They go through clerk's office, Evan, or...
I'll put it,
We have it electronically. I'll forward it to the clerk's office.
what I can do is put it on the city's website, so
Sure.
it'll be available to anyone that wants to look at it or print it out.
At this time, I would ask you to cut to the chase as far as the time frames. I think that's cost and method. So
the last slide, Brian. These are the particular industries that are most affected, and it's based on this limit carbonation bio-oxygen demand, biochemical oxygen demand. And some of these users listed here, based on how we were able to allocate the loadings, what was available, they would have to take pretreatment measures to their wastewater that are on the order of a 50% reduction. This is based on with the landfill in, not with RIARC going over to MBC, at which time we would go back and reevaluate the limits. That's all I have.
Okay. Any questions from the council on this? I know we had a lot of questions at Public Works. There being none, when will this, Solicitor, could you tell us when this will come before us again? Or?
Well, from here, I understand that DEM will be accepting comments from different related entities, and we'll be in discussions with them on where it goes from here.
Mr. Gorka, could you also supply to the clerk the communication line for interested parties to go through DEM?
Sure.
That would be especially important. I know they would.
Sure.
I wouldn't know who to call down there, so. Because this was a public hearing. Are there any questions from any members of the audience about this presentation or any of its elements? Going once, twice? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gawker, and
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, where are we now? We did the resolution. Okay, we are on reports of committees. Okay, this was reported out of committee, and this was just for informational purposes, so we are not voting on this 8S12-1. So now we're on Finance Committee.
Thank you, Council President.
Chair Arquette.
Thank you, Council President. I'm going to defer to the Vice Chairman because I was out of town when the Finance Subcommittee met, so I'm going to defer to Councilman Stichels.
Councilman Stichels.
Yes, we have the authorization of the real estate tax abatements, which the Finance Committee has recommended.
Motion is second. Any discussion? There being none, will clerk please take the vote.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
We have the motor vehicle tax abatements recommended by the assessor and also recommended by the Finance Committee.
Motion, is a motion and second? Any discussion? There being none, clerk please take the roll.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Next, we have the tax interest waiver approvals recommended by the city treasurer and the Finance Committee.
Motion to approve.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Clerk please take the roll.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
I don't know why that's listed on there twice.
Were there any denials, Councilman?
Next, the committee reviewed the mayor's appointment of Kenneth Mason as the next public works director and recommended that the full council approve Mr. Mason as the public works director. Mr. Mason currently works in the city of Newport as the deputy utilities director, which is water. His experience in the private sector. I think probably if people have questions, they'll go directly to Mr. Curley and to me, but we did recommend that he be approved. And the salary was negotiated was $5,000.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Council President. I would like to make a short on behalf of the administration and the terms of Articles 3 of the City Code. I'd like to present for your consideration the candidacy of Mr. Kenneth Mason for the position of Director of Public Works for the City of Cranston. Mr. Mason is known
of Cranston East. He went on to URI and got his Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering and went on to get his PE license from the state of Rhode Island. Currently resides in Warwick with his family. Mr. Mason brings an array of experience, both private and public, to his resume, and he currently is the Deputy Director of Public Works at the city of Newport, Rhode Island, as Mr. Stikos indicated. The unique abilities that he brings to this position is that he oversees the wastewater contractor for the city of Newport, much like our arrangement that we have with Veolia Water. So he has a great deal of experience in overseeing that kind of contractual help. With your permission, Council President, I'd like to introduce at this time Mr. Mason and ask him if he would like to make a few opening comments and also address any questions you may have.
Good evening. My name is Ken Mason, and I would like to thank the City Council for...
Your address, Mr. Mason?
Pardon?
Your address.
9 10th Avenue in Warwick. I would like to thank the City Council for considering me to be the next Public Works Director. I believe my combination of private and public sector work, including significant experience in storm and wastewater utilities, building construction, road work, municipal work, I believe provides a very good fit for this position. I pride myself in running an efficient department and keeping within budgets, and I fully understand the demands placed on this position, both in time and energy required, and I am up for these challenges. I'd like to answer any questions if I could.
Well, just stay at the podium there. Now, we're under discussion under the motion. Councilman Arquette.
Question on the motion, Council President?
This is part of the discussion. We're under discussion. We have a motion, we have a second. Now we're under discussion.
You don't mind if I ask a question to Mr.
Through the chair, yes.
Through the chair, just a couple of questions. Mr. Mason, I apologize for not being at the hearing. I had a prior commitment, but in Ward 3, we've got issues with sidewalks. We have trees, and the roots of the trees uproot the sidewalks, so I'm getting calls on how to address to repair these sidewalks on Harmon Avenue, Crescent Avenue, and do you have any suggestions how we can deal with finished sidewalks that have been uprooted by tree roots?
There's a method that the City of Newport has actually put in place for the last couple of years, and that's where they actually grind the edges of the sidewalk to make a smooth transition. And they've been able to do that and been able to save repairing and replacing entire panels. It's worth trying, I believe.
I'm glad you had a response and answer for it. Sounds good. I want to commend your application here. I'm going to support you. I'd like to see Cranston hire people from Cranston. I'd like to see the mayor get along with his cabinet. We need to all work together in these trying times. So I am going to support your candidacy. Thank you, Council President.
Anyone else? Mr. Mason, just a quick question. If we're going to vote in a second, when would you start? Do you have to give notice? When would your starting date be?
I would be able to start, I believe, either September 10th or September 17th. I need to give at least 2 weeks' notice.
Very good. Okay, that being said, no other further discussion. Clerk, please take the roll on the motion. Or I should say it's not a motion, it's an advice and consent. We're approving the advice and consent passed on by the Finance Committee.
Yes.
Yes.
No. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Welcome. And good luck. See if that grinding machine fits in the trunk of your car on your way out of Newport. You get Tim White in here next week. Councilman, discussion? Councilman Calucci?
The balance in the rest of the police impact fee will be zero, because we took, the resolution takes whatever's left in the rest impact fees, and then the balance for the eastern impact fees. I believe there's about 35,000 in this. Oh, after we take this 3,000, then the balances. Yes.
My understanding is that when the council wanted to use, it was a total of $145,000 for lease payments. We got a legal opinion that we could use impact fees for the payment of the lease or the rent. And this is, from my understanding, this is the first time it's ever been used this way. We've never used this money for lease payments, I don't believe, not since I've been here anyway.
But is this, I'm sorry, is this, if they're building a new project, and they have to invest in the impact fees for roads?
Yeah.
Is that the same as the police impact fees?
Yes,
It is the same.
yes.
What are we gonna do next month when the lease payment comes up? Now, we're gonna get money from that.
We've already budgeted for the whole year.
So this is already budgeted?
Yes, in other words, let's say we budgeted 1.2 million out of the general fund, and this 145,000 would bring it up to, say, 1,345,000. So it's all been allocated for the fiscal year. So there's enough to pay every month's rent.
But I don't believe this is what we put impact fees aside for.
Well, I mean, that was a decision that was voted upon by the council to use that 145,000. Well,
Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, the next ordinance is to do with reallocated funds in the mayor's office for the three positions. And finance.
Larry. Would someone what kind of- who's handling the projector? That gentleman just walked in. Right, I'm sorry, Mr. Stein.
The Finance Committee recommends passage of this. It is revenue neutral. Numbers change for individual positions, but the total expenditure is the same as budgeted.
There's a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? Councilman Arquette.
Yes, I just inquisitive on what three positions are we talking about, may I ask?
They're listed in
Yeah, you mentioned three positions, realignment.
Yeah, they're,
I would assume the chief of staff would be one,
yes.
is that correct? What are the other
They're
two?
on, they're on the, they're right on the ordinance, the old positions and the new positions.
Can you name the other two for me?
Sure,
So
the-
publicly we know?
Yep, the confidential secretary and the director of constituent affairs.
And you said it's revenue neutral, meaning there's no excess money, just a shift of money, correct?
Right, essentially the salaries for the confidential secretary and the director of constituent affairs are going down, and the chief of staff is going up.
Okay, and the salaries are public knowledge for anyone who wants to know that on the internet, correct? On the
Correct.
website? All right, fine. Thank you, Councilman.
Councilman Navarro, Council Vice President Navarro.
Thank you. So basically, there's no changes in the titles for the two confidential secretary. That's staying the same, Director of Constituent Affairs, but their salaries are being decreased. But there is a change in name from Deputy Director of Administration. Now it's going to be called Chief of Staff. Is that correct? Through the chair, Mr. President.
That's correct.
Okay. Why the change in name? I mean, you kept the other ones the same. Is there going to be different duties, or is there something that, I know it's revenue neutral, but is there a reason why the change in name?
Yes, sir, if I may, Council President. As we know, the deputy director's position was vacated, I want to say probably 6 weeks ago now, in that ballpark. And it gave the administration an opportunity to readdress how we wanted to assign responsibilities in the office. And this is basically just a slight reorganization of responsibilities in the office. And an oversimplification of that would be that the current constituent affairs person will be giving up those responsibilities to a new person who came in. Okay, it's already here. And then that person would be elevated, the existing constituent affairs person would become chief of staff. And along with that would be a number of additional responsibilities that he didn't have in the past. And among those would be, if you'd like me to go down through this for you, is he would assume responsibility now for the mayor's direct report support staff. That would be the full-time admin, 2 part-time admins, and then the new constituent affairs person would all be answerable to him, and he would be immediate oversight for them, okay? Secondly, the other thing that he would be responsible for going forward is all of the liaison efforts that go on between various entities of government, not only local, but also state and federal, so that there's a constant communication there at that level as well. And thirdly, he will also be involved in policy creation and policy implementation going forward, as far as administrative policy. And then last but not least, he will continue to handle constituent affairs that are directly related to council requests. So that part of his responsibility will remain with the new chief of staff.
So basically, I mean, are these added responsibilities to the administration, or these responsibilities, because everything you mentioned seemed to have to have happened, right? So were those responsibilities shared, or somebody else was doing them, like the director of administration? I mean, was there? Because you're not creating new responsibilities, are you?
No, sir. No, we're not. What we're trying to do is consolidate like-minded sorts of responsibilities into the chief of staff position. And one of the things we didn't want to give up is the ongoing relationship he had in dealing with council as far as constituent responsibilities. So that's the only thing that's really not changing. But the rest of the responsibilities went on in that executive office.
Right.
We just found it better to focus those particular responsibilities into one seat.
Gotcha. And thank you, Mr. Cordy. And just one final note, I'm talking to my colleagues and looking at the numbers here, they're saying it's revenue neutral? I just want to point for the record that it is off by $4. So we're going to have to find those $4 somewhere, because it's not revenue neutral right now. But, so we got to figure out who's going to lose $4 in this salary there. But, all right, I'm going to support this, because I think Mr. Lopez doing is there already is Mr. Lopez the chief of staff, or the
Acting, yes.
Acting, yes. So Mr. Lopez does a phenomenal job, working with the council, as well as the duties that go along in the mayor's office. So I'm gonna support this ordinance. Thank you.
Any other discussion? There being none, clerk, please take the roll.
Yes.
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 Yes. Ordinance Committee.
Thank you, Council President. I'll also defer to the Vice Chair on this, Councilman Stichels.
Okay. The ordinance committee was presented with 5 ordinances from the city planning office and the mayor's office. And they consisted of a rewrite of the definitions of the zoning code, a reconfiguration of the use table, what you can do in each zone, a rewrite of the site plan review process, and the 2 ordinances that are on the agenda tonight. The first ordinance the committee recommends, and it has to do with, we recommend it because it was simple, unlike the others, and it has to do with the requirement, the rule that in certain zones you can only have 1 residential building. And the current, as it was explained to us, the current ordinance says you can only have 1 building, but it only mentions, I don't remember the specific zones, but it only mentions a couple of zones. So this is a clarification to make it crystal clear that there's supposed to be only 1 residential building in various, really all the residential zones except for the residential zone that allows multiple buildings or apartment buildings, apartment complexes. So we recommend that this pass.
Is there a motion?
Second.
The motion is second. Any discussion? There being none, clerk, please take the roll.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, the next ordinance is, as Mr. Lapola explained, is approving changes to the comprehensive plan in response to the state's requests for amendments to the plan that was submitted last year. The committee referred this to the full council without a recommendation, and our feeling was that this issue was very important, fairly complex, and that it made sense for the whole council to be in on the discussion from the start, rather than us to go through it in committee with 3 or 4 people and then have to go through it all over again before the full council. So that was our thinking, and that's where we are on that.
Council President, I would like to make a motion to continue to a special council meeting, because I believe a lot of input on this issue and a lot of people are concerned and sensitive. I'll make a motion to continue.
Second. Okay, do we have a particular date in mind? Clerk, do we need to have a particular date to continue to a date certain, or do we continue to a date uncertain for a special meeting to be called?
If you continue it to a date to be announced, I'll just need to re-advertise it. That would be the only difference.
Okay, so motion to continue is not debatable. and not discussable, so clerk, please take the roll.
No. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. No. Yes.
Yes. Safety Services and License Committee.
Mr. Chair, I would like to defer to the Vice Chair as I was not at that meeting. I was on vacation.
Thank you, Council President. Yes, I did chair the Safety Services Committee that evening, and we had two ordinances that passed. First, Tees and Jarvis LLC BV 73. I believe there were three of us, and we voted unanimously on this, Council President. Entertain a motion.
All right, on Tees and Jarvis, is that what we're doing? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? There being none, clerk, please take the roll.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Next is the grill on Comstock BV 74. This also passed unanimously in committee, Council President.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
The motion and second, any discussion? Councilman Stichels.
I just have a question of, is there a standard on if a person requesting a liquor license was involved in illegal activities, would the council be within its rights to deny the liquor license? Say if they had convictions or...
If there are prior convictions unrelated to the license before the council, then I don't believe that that disqualifies or gives the council the power to disqualify them from obtaining a new license in another matter. So if it were a business where there were a number of criminal violations in that business and they came back for renewal, the council could, within their power, deny a renewal in that context. But taking a different context in which someone has criminal convictions unrelated to the operation of the business, whatever those criminal convictions may be, those do not give the council a basis to deny a license. There has to be a reasonable and rational relationship between the conduct and the license being offered.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? I'd like to just make a statement at this point in time. I don't know where Mr. Stichels was going with this, but I've known Mr. Panacchia for many years, and I've never known him to be involved in any illicit and/or criminal activity, to my knowledge. Do you have some knowledge that you want to share with us?
No, it's completely unrelated to this.
Okay, I just wanted you to, I want that for the record, that it was
Thank
not
you.
Mr. Panacchia.
No, that's a good point. I just happened to bring it up.
You know, the boner I'm not sure about, but with that being said, will the clerk please take the roll?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and good luck to the Grill on Comstock and Tees and Jarvis. May you be successful and multiply and keep business going in the city of Cranston.
Thank you, President.
All right, next. Can we take a break?
Claims Committee?
These are the claims that have been settled by the Claims Committee listed here for public information.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? There being none, clerk, please take the roll.
Yes.
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 Where my sheet is on undocketed items. Here it is. Mr. Strom, could you ask the people in the car to move, because it's echoing in here. And under undocketed items, are there any members of the public? I have two people that signed up. Any members who wish to speak on any undocketed item? The first one is Douglas Bryan. State your name and address for the record.
My name is Douglas Bryan. I live at 120 Bayview Avenue. I'm here tonight following up a meeting of the zoning board on August 8th. I'm new to Cranston. My wife and I have lived here about a year, so we're just becoming familiar, but we're very familiar with the block that I live on because it's very friendly, lots of children. We have 3 grandchildren right across the street from where we're living now. And at the meeting of the zoning board, there were at least 40 people, bodies, including women, children, and this at a hearing that went till 10 o'clock before they could even be considered to be heard. And there was a petition signed by 50-some odd people. I was involved in getting some of those names on the petitions because there was very serious concerns about this project at, I think it's 1054 Narragansett Boulevard. It is a laundromat, which is not really the issue, but in fact, there was no listing of the fact that it was a laundromat in any of the information that went out. So it really isn't, that's not the issue, but there are issues particularly of traffic, the way that traffic is supposed to flow, and also even the setback issues that were, variances that were granted by the zoning board, because it looks very much that you're going to cut back on the view of the avenue looking to the north from our street when you come out of it, and which is, Narragansett Boulevard is pretty busy, particularly at certain hours. And also at the corner of Narragansett and Bayview, there is, that is a school bus stop. And there are at least, I think about 15 children, school-aged children on our block. And the way, I'm getting kind of muddled in the way I present this, but one of the issues is that the design of the traffic pattern into that facility and out, there are 2 entrances to this large facility. It's going to take the whole block where the Sunoco gas station, the remnants are still there. You can come in from Narragansett Boulevard, you can come in from Smith Street. But every vehicle, whether it's cars, whether it's trucks, garbage pickups, everything, will exit out onto Bayview Avenue. Bayview Avenue is 24 feet across. And it's already sometimes difficult to get out of Bayview Avenue when the traffic is going in there, even if you make a right and don't try to cut across to the left. And all the additional traffic that would be loaded onto this 24-foot Bayview Avenue is really scary. And also the fact that right now it's a dead-end street, and sometimes people make the wrong turn, they don't know it's a dead end, and they have to go down, and they don't go slowly quite often, and they have to turn around and come back. Unless there is some way to prevent that, then, some of the people who come out of that dropping off their laundry or whatever, and then could also make a left turn or try to find parking, along Bayview Avenue, which, as I say, is 24 feet across. So these are some concerns, and I didn't really mean to get into the specific concerns tonight because this is obviously not the right place to discuss all this. I mean, But the point was, what happened after the zoning board meeting was that everyone got, incidentally, the only notification, there was nothing from the planning board or planning committee, and I don't know what their procedures are, ahead of time about a discussion of this proposal, where it seems to me would have been an appropriate place to discuss some of these issues, because they're not so simple, some of them. But this is the notice that we got, I think within proper time prior to the zoning board meeting, and then there's the same one that we got for the notification, which just says this application was approved on 8/8/12. Now, where is the opportunity for the residents of the community to really engage in this process? This is not academic for them. You know, this area, what we're talking about, it's a C2 zoning area, but it's at the very edge of the C2. And you look around, it's a residential area. Okay, I know, I'm sorry I've extended, you know.
Just so you understand a couple of things.
Yeah.
This has to go through what you went through a particular process that's prescribed by law.
Right, okay, I appreciate that.
If it was a change that had to go through the planning department, there would have been a site plan review and all of the corresponding
Right.
efforts. If it's within the uses that are prescribed for the property and there are changes, it's basically going to the zoning board to get approvals for those nuances that they need. Parking and traffic would be borne by the developer to determine what this traffic would be. The zoning board, who you have to address, is autonomous. We have no control. There should be no political control over the zoning board. So,
well, I do
while
understand.
I can certainly understand somewhat your frustration, I don't think there was anything that was done out of the ordinary or
No.
illegally. So, your next step would be to appeal the zoning decision, if there was, by seeking an attorney and getting them to consider an appeal, and then it would have to go through the courts.
Yeah, I don't want to delay and use up more of your time. I just want to say that, of course, has been considered. Someone has been in touch with an attorney, but the fee for the attorney is $25,000. I mean, we're talking, take a look at this in the street in Bayview Avenue. No one's going to, together or anything, or Smith Street, they're not going to come up with $25,000. I mean, I suppose as an alternative, you can represent yourself, can you not, in an appeal?
I can't, I'm not an attorney, I couldn't give you advice. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, and I didn't really explain. They take that back. I apologize for that. But I mean, basically, this is the frustration. At no point in this process has there been an open invitation to the members of the community who are going to live with this from here on out. And we're all struggling to improve this block. But we're going to live with it. There's been no opportunity except the zoning board, which was a bad opportunity. It was late at night. We didn't even know all the details and so forth, but it should have been, in my view, I was trying to get a copy of the planning. All right, anyway, I thank you for hearing me. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And we had Dick Tomlins signed up.
Richard Tomlins, 400 Farmington Avenue in Cranston. I'll make a couple of quick comments and then I'll get on to something else. I want you to know that this idea of a 5-year plan to prevent this city from going under, I will not give up on it. You will be hearing, you will be seeing writings, and you will be seeing other things. When I talk about it, particularly during the election area, when I look out, which I usually do, I see very unexpressive eyes, which tells me it must be an election season and nobody wants to take on a situation such as that, because a 5-year plan is going to show what the city is going to have to do in its revenue and expenses over a 5-year period in order not to go into bankruptcy or something less than that, which is more than a possibility when you look at that unfunded liability that stands over us. So I would suggest that you turn yourself around. You took an oath of office and start to work on something now. If there's something that you've done that I'm not aware about and that you're working on, everybody knows my email. Please use it. Another thing that I want to talk about is in the city. I've gotten great responses in my ward, Ward 3, from my Councilman Paul and from the police department, and trying to see that that ward is picked up and kept up. There's a lot of junk lying around. There's a lot of people that are renting and they're taking advantage of those homes, and it's creating, certainly know what happened at 399, which is right across the street from my house. But that, even though that was a murder yet to be charged, there was other instances in that property that are available to the public because they have been charged. So they're not the only ones. I've talked to my neighbors. There's a lot of things going on, particularly in this environment that we're in because of the economic situation, the turmoil in the country, even going through the national election, I suppose, but also the cleanup. I think in one situation, a refrigerator out there without a door off, everybody knows what the danger of that is. So I think each council person should take a tour of their own wards and determine what should be done. There are things that can be done. And I was in the west end of the city, in Western Cranston, during Mike Napolitano's election, and we went out there and had to correct things. So no ward, in that case, they had sheep on their property. There's no ward that is off the chart as far as what you have to watch out for. It's not going to get better. It can only get worse. So please get out there and do your own investigation. Thank you.
You're doing a good job with the timing, I'll tell you. You're right on. 7 seconds. Anyone else on an undocketed item? There being none, that section is closed. And okay. Just as I may have suspected, we have to clean up something on the zoning. It needs to go to a date certain. So I would need a motion for reconsideration from, I think everyone.
I'll move to reconsider. Second.
Motion to reconsider, second. Clerk, please take the roll on reconsidering.
What ordinance?
The zoning ordinance. The comp plan, excuse me, they said zoning, comp plan.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now I need a motion to, they wanted a special hearing, is what was requested.
Council President, who wants a special hearing?
That's what the councilwoman had suggested in her remark.
You guys voted.
Councilman Stichels.
Yes, I would have said this before, but because the motion was not debatable, I didn't have a chance to say anything. I mean, I think the first question is does the full, we forwarded this to the full council because the thinking was we didn't want to talk about it in a small group before the ordinance committee and then go over everything all over again before the full council. Now, if the full council would rather have the ordinance committee deal with this, then I think the motion should be to refer it back to the ordinance committee. If the full council wants to be in on the action, then I think we need a special meeting.
How about if I throw another suggestion out, that as an agenda item, that we move this back to ordinance, and as an agenda item on that committee, that we have that as a special hearing for that particular item or that agenda item. And any of the council members who are not on the ordinance committee are welcome to attend. And none of you are ever excluded from attending those meetings. Councilman Donahue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in response to your suggestion, the ordinance committee could hold a special hearing on the comprehensive plan ordinance. Then it would vote that potentially back to the full council for the September council meeting. So as a point of clarification before I make this vote, if I may, through the chairman to Mr. LaPola, is there any risk, downside risk, to having the comprehensive plan be voted on a month from now?
This came about because, and I'm not sure, and that's why you're going to have to ask the lawyers on this. The law says if you continue a hearing to a date, time, place certain, that's all that's required for the continuance of that hearing. Is if you don't continue it to a date, time, place certain, then the requirement for notification is the same notification as to what's the original notification. So for the comp plan for this city, it's notification twice a week in a paper of general circulation for 3 consecutive weeks. Now, I don't know where the notification comes in, if it's with City Council or the Ordinance Committee. If it's the Ordinance Committee, you have the same problem. If you still may have the same problem because this was scheduled for a public hearing and it wasn't continued to a date, time, place certain. I don't know. That's why you have lawyers, and I'm only a planner.
Well, I think if it's continued even into the ordinance committee, it complies with the date certain language in the state law.
So what's your pleasure, gentlemen? Would the ordinance, so it would prevent, it's been difficult to get people to meetings. I got to be frank with that. So
Council
if
President,
we can do it on an ordinance committee meeting, at least 5 members should show up, and then whoever else wants to show up may.
Council President, I was at that meeting, even though I'm not a member of the committee, but I had no voting power on it. So it's basically, I don't even know what the vote was. You know, we can check in the records, but
It was to pass it through with no recommendation. Councilman Arquette.
Thank you, Council President. My concern is if we send it back to ordinance and we create a special hearing for the ordinance committee, then we're going to be in the same boat we were a few weeks ago with only 2 members attending, and the president being forced to attend because we can't get a quorum. In my opinion, I think we're safer sending it to the next council meeting for all the members to have their input and discuss the comprehensive plan. My concern is if we call a special meeting and then we have a problem with a quorum, I think we're going to look pretty bad. And we're going to risk that. If the council members want to risk that, we risk it. But it's my opinion we should send this to the September council meeting.
What's your pleasure, gentlemen? Whoever wants to make the motion to whatever meeting, as long as it's a date certain.
I agree with you. I would move to continue it to the next council meeting.
I'll second that.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Councilman Stichels?
I'm sorry, I was...
There was a motion to move the discussion concerning the comp plan to the next council meeting. Full council meeting.
Wouldn't then the appropriate motion be a motion to table? And then at that council meeting, there would be a motion to take it off the table and then discuss it?
Well, because of the requirement that it has to go to a date certain, I think you have
see.
to select a date certain tonight, which I think the next council meeting is September 24.
Okay, thank you.
So there's a motion to make it, to move the discussion to the next council meeting, which is a date certain. Councilman Favicchio?
Thank you, Council President. Just one thing to my colleagues, too, and those that are not here as well, I would implore them to at least look into this and ask some questions prior to the meeting so that we're not asking a million questions. The issue has come up for quite a long time, and it has been advertised, and I believe Mr. Lopolo has been here many times to explain this to all of us. So I don't think it's new, and I think we've all had a chance to digest it, but if anyone has questions, do it beforehand so we can get this behind us.
Councilman Stichels?
We did at the committee raise that issue, I raised that I'd like to see something in writing as to what the changes in the comprehensive plan were. And Mr.